Hello, and welcome to, this will be Lecture 9 in this new Drugs and Human Behavior series. This will start our section on the epidemiology and neurobiology of addiction. But I first want to talk a little bit about the Controlled Substances Act, because this has a great deal to do with how we regulate drugs, in particular their addictive potential. So I want to start off by talking about what the Controlled Substances Act is and the different ways in which it regulates different types of drugs. So throughout this section, we're going to start off by talking about the CSA, and we'll talk about some the prevalence, incidence, and impact of drug use and abuse, get into the neurobiology of addiction, and then get more into how people go from abuse to addiction, how that relates to epigenetics, and finally some pharmacotherapy for substance use disorders. But those are in coming lectures. So in this one, we will talk about the Controlled Substances Act. We'll start off by looking at the history and context of the CSA, talk about drug schedules, and then I want to talk a little bit about methylene-dioxymethamphetamine, or MDMA, because I think it's an important consideration about how we schedule drugs and how we can limit their potential therapeutic use. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about some public policy debates in rescheduling marijuana. So the CSA was enacted in 1970. The 1960s saw pretty dramatic in drug use, which culminated in the Summer of Love in 1969. There was a significant uptick in the use of marijuana, certainly heroin, PCP, barbiturates, lots of different types of drugs. LSD, of course, became very popular at this time period, psilocybin mushrooms, peyote, and so there became an increasing concern in the amount of drug use. In particular, oftentimes as it related to the war in Vietnam. And so the two, I think, are linked in quite a few ways, as you can see. Smoking marijuana out of a gun here, which I wouldn't recommend you trying at home. The 1960s saw a dramatic increase in those drug use. Oftentimes, drug use is a way in which people cope with trauma, and in particular the trauma of war, and so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along. This whole movement coincided with war protests and some pretty massive drug use in the military, and so there came to be concern about this sort of counterculture movement. And how much of this was out of concern of the addictive nature of drugs and how much of it was some other type of control mechanism is unclear. But certainly there was a desire to regulate drugs. And certainly I think we should regulate drugs. I'm not trying to argue that we shouldn't. But the sort of cultural, political context, I think, is important in understanding how we came to regulating drugs in this country. The Drug Enforcement Agency was created by an executive order in 1973. The Drug Enforcement Agency is primarily tasked with enforcing the Controlled Substances Act and is involved in drug interdiction efforts along with the Customs and Border Patrol and the Coast Guard and a variety of other agencies. There are several different ways in which the Controlled Substances Act controls substances. So drugs and other substances are considered controlled substances are divided into 5 schedules. Substances are placed in their respective schedules based on a number of different criteria, primarily whether or not they have a currently accepted medical use, what their abuse potential is, and their likelihood of causing dependence when abused. So if there is no currently accepted medical use, those are the most strictly regulated, usually in Schedule 1, particularly those that have a high potential for abuse and dependence. And then they go down from there. So we'll start with Schedule 1. A Schedule 1 narcotic is a drug or substance that has a high potential for abuse. The drug or other substance has no currently accepted medical use and treatment in the United States. There is a lack of accepted safety for use of the drug or other substance under medical supervision. And drugs in this schedule include heroin, ecstasy, LSD, marijuana, and other cannabimimetic agents, and we'll talk about those agents here in a moment. The most controversial inclusion under here is marijuana. There's arguments about whether it has acceptable medical treatments, and there's also clear arguments about its potential for abuse and addiction. I think a lot of people find it strange that heroin and marijuana are included in the same schedule, along with ecstasy and LSD. The cannabimimetic agents are often things like spice, and that's sort of a new addition. And in fact, in 2012, Congress added these cannabimimetic agents to Schedule 1. And what they discovered is each time they outlawed one, another one would crop up. And so this is the first class of drugs defined by which receptor subtype they influence. So this isn't about the drug itself, but the receptor in which it interacts. So the term cannabimimetic means any substance that is a cannabinoid receptor type 1 CB1 receptor agonist, as demonstrated by binding studies and functional assays within any of the following structural classes. So this is the first time it actually is an agent is regulated based on what it's doing in the brain. And that's a very new type of regulation. Most often, we have simply regulated the chemical structures themselves, but many people have discovered a small tweak becomes a whole different type of drug. These spice drugs have fallen out of favor, at least as far as I've noticed, primarily through legalization efforts for cannabis in particular. Schedule 2 narcotics then are any drug or other substance that has a high potential for abuse, but has a currently accepted medical use, can be currently accepted with severe restrictions. Importantly, Schedule 2 narcotics can lead to severe psychological or physical dependence. These drugs include cocaine, amphetamine, methylphenidate, oxycodone, and fentanyl. I'm sure you're probably at home wondering what possible medical use cocaine could have. It's actually often used as a topical anesthetic. So, for example, in sinus surgeries, cocaine is a particularly effective way in which to numb the sinuses of a sinus patient. Adderall is dextro and levoamphetamine, as we've discussed previously and we'll discuss again. And then these other drugs I'm sure you're familiar with, or you will be as we move along. Schedule 3 narcotics. These are drugs or other substance that has potential for abuse less than drugs or other substances in Schedules 1 and 2, has currently accepted medical use, moderate to low physical dependence, but potentially high psychological dependence. These are primarily the sort of combination hydrocodone drugs, Vicodin, that sort of thing. This also includes ketamine and also anabolic steroids. We're going to talk about ketamine and esketamine later on when we get to talking about depression, because that's a particularly new use for this drug, and it's actually been approved under a fairly limited approval regimen that involves an approved treatment site. Schedule 4 narcotics have low potential for abuse relative to Schedule 3, currently accepted medical use, limited physical or psychological dependence. And these are things like all of the benzodiazepines, Xanax, Valium, Ativan, also the drug modafinil, which is used to treat narcolepsy, but has also been shown to improve functioning in some depression patients and also improve fluid intelligence in users. This is one of the areas where I sort of question the scheduling, because certainly alprazolam has a high potential for physical dependence. If somebody takes Xanax every day, particularly if they're taking a relatively high dose, and then goes off that drug suddenly, they're at high risk for seizure and death. And so that's something to be very cautious of. Schedule 5, again, low potential for abuse, currently accepted medical use. Again, limited physical dependence or psychological dependence compared to Schedule 4. And this is primarily codeine-containing cough syrups. In several states, as an adult, you can actually get these codeine-containing cough syrups from a compounding pharmacy without a prescription. So you'd have to check your state or local regulations. And none of the national pharmacies will do so, but sometimes compounding pharmacies will. So a major question I think a lot of people get concerned with is how we schedule, deschedule, or reschedule these particular drugs. So how do they end up in these schedules? So under the United States Code, factors determinative of control or removal from schedules include: the Attorney General shall consider the following factors with respect to each drug or other substance to be controlled or removed from the schedules. So this is entirely decided by the Attorney General. So this is one of these areas in which the executive branch has a great deal of control. Without amending the CSA, Congress has no ability to change these schedules. It's done entirely at the behest of the Attorney General. So the criteria they must consider is the actual or relative potential for abuse of a drug, scientific evidence of its pharmacological effect, if they're known, state of current scientific knowledge regarding the drug, history and current pattern of abuse, scope, duration, and significance of abuse, what, if any, risk there is to the public health, psychic or physiological dependence liability, and whether the substance is an immediate precursor of a substance already controlled under this subchapter. So all of these are ways in which you can, what you can actually see from this criteria is it's mostly designed for adding drugs to the schedule, not removing them from the schedule or changing where they are in the schedule. And so this is particularly problematic for things like marijuana legalization, using drugs like MDMA for treating PTSD, which we'll talk about later on in the term. So the DEA has recently rescheduled some hemp-derived products. So CBD oil has been rescheduled. That also occurred through an act of Congress in an agricultural bill. We're having some difficulty with CBD products and hemp products because the law is a little fuzzy in other areas. So I know hemp farmers who have problems with banking and other issues, and we'll talk more about these as we talk through the semester. But this is an area in which we really have a lot of regulatory work to do. So the World Health Organization has recently recommended rescheduling marijuana and hemp components under an international treaty in order to increase trade, particularly in these hemp-derived products and things like CBD products. So that's a quick introduction to the Controlled Substances Act. We'll talk about different areas regarding this throughout the semester, but I think it's an important place to start when trying to understand our current regulatory environment.